Yeah, so I appreciate that about the peripheral narration. That's a good word to I'll take away that phrase. The first, I don't know if it's the exact first line of the book. I think it is pretty close. Quote, I always told Turtle when I was raising her, if a man acts like a child, then send him back to his AG. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah,
And let him straighten and let her straighten him out. And so we've got Turtle, who's the daughter of Lena, and she goes with her husband Everardo to a homecoming. I think it'd been 10 years since he had seen his mom down in Chihuahua, Mexico. And just so many cool little details that you add there, like as Turtle's watching them and how much they love each other and how much they've missed each other. Quote, they laughed with different pitches but the same rhythm. And mom didn't want to let her son go. Hugs and kisses, but then, which is an extremely pivotal moment in the book, and it's really early on, is where Everardo is beaten by cops as they're coming. I think they're 30 miles from the border. What was so important about that beating? How did it really kind of like spider web out and affect the rest of the book?
Yeah, no, I needed to capture male on male violence. I mean, and as you go through the novel, you see where Evergima settles on this trajectory where he's dealing with his own aggression. And so it was a moment where I wanted to capture not only that dynamic, but also connecting the U.S. and Mexico in that space as well. So broadening out like the concept of indigenous landscapes, to include Mexico as well. Because a lot of times the dialogue is centered, especially here in the United States, on the U.S. and also Canada. But sometimes we have a hard time looking to Mexico to see there's indigenous people in Mexico too.
Right.
And it's all Turtle Island. It's all North America. It's all part of the same continent. And so wanting to try to shift that lens a little bit. But also that, like this is the most pivotal moment in Ever's life, according to Lena Stopp. So who narrates that chapter? Like if you went to his grandmother and said, "Hey, what's the most significant thing that happened to your grandson?" This is what she's going to say. Like, because this happened, he was present when his father was beat by police. And what it did in the native context is it witched him. And because it witched him, it sent him on this trajectory where he had to struggle with this kind of building aggression, where he's getting multiple signals throughout his life to be aggressive. In order to survive, you got to be aggressive. And so he had to, and that's where it started for Lena Stopp. That's where it started. But so having that kind of moment at the beginning of the novel is, I wanted to capture like, the intensity of how male on male violence creates this landscape of toxic masculinity,
right?
And exacerbates, those more subtle dynamics that that where toxic masculinity comes into play. But yeah, just to show that the main character has to overcome something, that's that significant.
No doubt. There's, it's really symbolic of like the mother and daughter where, Lena says, hey, come back to Tahlequah, right? Come back to Tahlequah, like closer to the Cherokee Nation, etc. Get, like you said, for the witching, get help. And then, the daughter's kind of like, no, I want to go to Lawton, for her different reasons. But yeah, I mean, just reading the beating scene, it's just like, why are these cops doing that? Why are they getting so worked up? Right. And you think about the poor Ever who's, in the car there, his little baby, I mean, very little. And just like, why even, when Turtle is like on her knees, like begging, like, why even would these men give in if they've already, you know what I mean? Just like what is going through their minds, basically, like you said. And it definitely captures just that toxic masculinity and just violence for no reason, I mean.
Yeah. Well, I think that one is the call to God. I think that there is, where she goes for God in the eyes of God, she calls to God. And I think that like pulls them out of it for a moment. But like say, okay, wait a minute, what am I doing? And it gets him to change his trajectory. I think
Huh.
there's a moment before that where she recognizes that call to God is going to alter their perspective.
Yeah, but they still took the money, right?
Yeah, no,
They
it's
didn't feel
yeah,
that bad. They didn't feel that bad.
no, there, I mean, it's yeah, the economic system at play, right? You got
Hmm.
super impoverished people going to exploit each other
Right.
um, at that border, right? And so that's one of the things that happened in my memory. A part of what my experience was at the border
Hmm.
in my own personal life, like whenever I was
Hmm.
2 and 3. So this is based off of my own experience.
Oh wow.
One of my earliest memory was whenever we went to Mexico, and we were stopped by the Mexican police, and that's what they wanted.
Hmm.
They wanted money from us, and they took, like my dad had boots on, and they took it out of his boots.
Hmm.
But they didn't stop there. So the ultimate victim in the real experience of my life was my mother. And
Uh-huh.
so what I do is I tend to take like real experiences, and then I switch it to fit more of a plot that's happening in the novel.
Hmm.
Um, and so I put it more of a male on male type violence as opposed to what really happened in my personal life. But to deny that that doesn't happen on the
Hmm.
border is like erasure. You know what I mean? If
I
you don't
see.
want to talk about if you don't want to talk about it, then we're not going to change anything.
Sure. Vincent is portrayed as we kind of talked a little bit. He's flawed for sure. But I mean, he's lovable. Turtle is following in her mom's footsteps in many ways. Ever, I guess, because he's so cute, he kind of helps with the home loan, right?
Oh yeah.
And just this idea of like the living situation, and the book goes from, pardon the pun, home plate to home plate with ideas of of home and that forever home, and just the idea of finding that place to live. Vincent's story is second, and this skips ahead, what is this, maybe 5 years?
Yeah, each chapter skips 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, so 8 days and counting for him to be sober. And these 5 years later, Everardo is, you talk about like masculinity. He's not, I don't even know if it's masculinity, but just like dignity, right? He, because of that injury from that beating, he's a mess. He's not
Yeah,
able to do very much, right?
yeah. No,
Uh,
he can't work.
right. And so then this idea of that he may be dying, or he's at least in physical pain big time. What's Vincent's secret, and how does he live that out, being that he's the only one, at least within the family, who knows his secret? What does he do with that knowledge?
As far as like him
Him getting
dying,
that
or
diagnosis, yes.
yeah, that he's just that he's tormented his family for a long time, being an addict, and that he is is not going to in this last moment um do it again.
And it's sad. It's sad that I mean, it's sad for many reasons, but he starts to establish a relationship with his grandkids, picking them up at school and all of that. He's proud of himself, or
Mm,
at least not mad at himself for staying sober, so that he can be some sort of rock, help out his daughter, help out the kids. He does miss one day, and then loses her trust again. Did I mean, where did you come up with this idea of Vincent as like just running out of time? You want him to be given more time, more time, more time, and obviously, and he's not given that time. What was it about
mm.
that cirrhosis diagnosis, and just him living out his days and trying to do something well, like redemption? Where did that come from, I guess?
Well, I guess it had to do with, it's based off of my own personal like family stories with my grandfather, who passed away when he was making my gourd dance.
Uh,
Me and my cousin Quincy Tahlequah, he was making our gourd dance regalia,
oh
and
wow.
he had passed away before he could finish it. And so just hearing that over the years, like I don't have any memory of my grandfather, but just hearing stories about him
Hmm.
and about that situation, and then wanting to capture that, I guess, that sense, that feeling um of someone wanting to fix things in the last moment,
Hmm.
and then what kind of legacy does he leave for his grandkids, and
Right.
just the memory he's going to, how are they going to remember him, or his family is going to remember him for his grandsons.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there's something incredibly affecting about him, like working on that regalia, And one of the quotes is, quote, "I didn't have to explain any part of the dance to them being the grandkids. They watched me and the other men and mimicked us. I was amazed at how quickly they followed in my footsteps. And then it scared me." That short sentence, "and then it scared me," makes you think of, are they going to follow him in the negative ways too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And in the end, he writes, quote, "But in the end, had I done enough? I know I chose alcohol over everyone. Can a failed father redeem himself with the hearts of his grandchildren?" Ooh, that's a heck of a good just writing. That's a heck of a beautiful phrase right there.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, just that, wanting to capture that sense of carrying forward, like, um, just that, growing up with that memory of my grandfather,
Mm-hmm.
and just thinking like, how would, what would be his final act of love? How would he try to do something in the final moment to say I love you, even though, really, I don't know if he could say.
Right.
I don't know if Vincent Guillermo can outright say that directly.
Sure.
Um, um, but like the regalia, and just him making the effort to change things, and even if it's in the final moment, that it is something to give a signal that this character is going to move on potentially a different path.
Right. So, as the book moves on, as Ever's grown up, Everardo is violent. Everardo is abusive.
Mm-hmm.
Everardo is someone to be feared, by his son, by his wife. And but Ever gets, he's aggressive as heck, but he gets a little gift in that, is it pronounced booger mask?
Yeah, so the traditional Cherokee mask, and so we call it. So booger mask is kind of like saying boogeyman.
Okay.
So like my grandmother would say, we'll call a monster a booger. So it's generational, but we still call them booger masks.
Yeah.
And so in that, yeah, just the act of healing, the traditional practice of using masks in a way to heal the community, symbolically trying to, the uncle's trying to heal his nephew with that mask. But it shows up again later in the novel as well.
You were in your zone. The end of that section with Hayes shade is, quote, "He stared at it, like it being the mask, looking like into a mirror, as if a distorted version of himself stared back. Time, like masks, could make us reclaim the best of who we were and purge the worst of what we become." I mean, that ever faced the mask, faced his fears, and I hope the mask healed him the way it once healed all Cherokees. That goes throughout the book. I mean, the same with with the quilts, of course, that come later, and just, it's not like all problems in Ever's life go away, but it's something that, there are so many of the little gifts, little community bonds that just, get him through, right? Like you said, day to day.
Yeah, I think it's the magic of familial love. Like the family Lena puts her love into the quilts.
Right.
Vincent puts his love into the Gort dance regalia. His uncle puts his love into the masks to try to heal him. And then Ever, eventually transfers that, later in the novel.
Yeah, and we get Lila, who's narrating Ever's visit with his father. They go to the quinceanera down in Mexico, right? That's Araceli, I believe.
Araceli, yeah.
And there's just the really interesting phrase, and I think, not being a native speaker, but I think I understand its implications. But he's like, he wants Ever to come in. Ever is incredibly antisocial, right? He's like, "Hey, come inside," because Everardo's, he's yucking it up. He's having drinks. He's kissing the woman on the neck, which upset Ever, and Ever doesn't want to come in. And the father comes out and makes a try, and it basically is just like, "Ni modo," right?
It is what it is.
It is what it is, and that just sums up so much about his the way he deals with his family, right? Like, well, gave it a try.
Yeah,
it is what it is, kind of like giving up in some ways.
Yeah, I think that part of it has to do with that it was too little, too late. I think too much history had already transpired, and so Ever, leans back on his aunt and his mom, in that moment, and so I think that it was just one of those moments where it was too little, too late,
Right.
and even inside of that particular chapter, Lila mentions that she understands that because her, Vincent was like that.
Yeah.
Vincent was very similar in his way of looking at the world as well.
Right.
So.
Yeah, a lot of repetition through the generations, right?
Yeah, and then we see that again with Lonnie, no water.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Quinn, like you said, has a fun little, fun chapter. Like it's mostly about the parties they have with the per caps. They get it. Per caps are every year.
Well, no, I mean, nowadays there are some tribes who do give them out like once a month or maybe once a year. Back then, for Kiowas specifically, we just got it when we turned 18.
Ah, yes. So it's like living it up, and do we buy a car? Do we put it in savings? And just they had some good times, right? And that's where this Hokeah character, possibly named Oscar, makes his appearance.
Yeah, he doesn't get invited to the party, so.
So Eduardo passes away, and it's kind of quietly. It's at the same time pretty much as the news of Sissy is Yolanda, is that right?
Yes, yeah, that's her. Right. Sissy is her nickname.
Yeah,
that's a common nickname here in the South. It's
like, okay.
Yeah, Sissy.
Yeah, I mean her getting pregnant, and just this idea of Turtle feels like her and Eduardo were the same as like this Tank and Sissy. She feels like, again, repeating itself, history repeating itself. Right. And I was so interested in that chapter. A lot of that chapter is just like what she wanted to say. She wanted to say so much to her daughter, but it was just, instead of saying it's safest at home, she watched her shows. Instead of saying, don't head out on the town, she watched her shows. She was quiet about it.
Yeah.
And just the idea of, like, I guess, communication or lack thereof. Go ahead.
No, I think it's her personality. And so she is based off of my mom, and who is super quiet. Like, not everybody has the same personality in the community. And so she has, she's more quiet, unlike her mom, who is very like headstrong. But the interesting thing about those, if you juxtapose Tahlequah and Lawton and Lena Stopp's chapters, is that they're both going through this moment where their kids are their own and they can't control them. Like you get in, like as a parent myself, I remember distinctly those moments where my kids were like, like all I can do is I got to guide them, and I got to give them advice, and just pray that they're going to make the right decision. And so I think that's part of what I want. It's that she's a quiet person.
Yeah.
And then also that her kids are adults, are becoming adults, and they're kind of you're doing. It's hard to stop them the way it was hard for Lena to get Turtle to do what she wanted.
We see Ever as he continues to get older, maturing more or less, definitely has some pit stops, if you will. But he married. So one of the next chapters was Yolanda, Sissy, in 1999, a few years later. And Lonnie and Ever just fall in love or fall in lust. I'm not sure which one, right? And can't get their hands off each other. And he's going to Korea. He's decided to join the military. And again, a lack of communication. Sissy is just thinking, okay, I don't want to ruin this or whatever, but she just sees really bad signs that Lonnie is trouble or troubled, right? And unfortunately, she becomes addicted to meth. She's cheating, or at least teasing in that way, and that's something where they have kids together, but they don't end up together down the road, right?
Yeah. So that's so Lonnie, that situation. Very similar in the sense that Ever Gimasaddle is like his mom, and that he deals with Lonnie the way his mom dealt with his dad.
Right.
So they're both addicts, right? His dad was an alcoholic. Lonnie becomes a meth addict, and so they're dealing with each other in a similar way. But with Lonnie, with addictions to meth, and I just see working in Indian child welfare, I see the residuals of this all the time. And just in the community, I live in the community and see the way a lot of this stuff plays out. But it's meth is a male dominated world, and in order to survive in it, I think Lonnie does things to get her meth, right? But also to survive in it. She's got to survive in it,
right? Yeah, without narrating every piece of this novel, because people need to read it. I can't think of a single character who is detestable, let's say. I mean, even Lonnie comes back later in the book, and you feel sympathy for her, you feel sympathy or you feel empathy. Jimena becomes Ever's wife later on, and we get to know her through, I think, one of the aunts who has a visit with her, and it's just a beautiful visit where it's like you talked about, like the chisme, right, or the word in Cherokee, where it's like that gossip. You get to think people, And
Mhm.
sometimes you have no idea,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
No, yeah. How much of what we know about each other is hearsay, and how much
Yeah.
of what we perceive of each other's identity is
Mm.
based on hearsay. Um, but yeah, that's one of the things whenever I write my characters, like even Eduardo, like to ever Saddle, Eduardo was an abusive person and he just didn't want anything to do with them. But Araceli, his cousin, that was her favorite uncle.
Right.
Like he was funny and he was the center of attention, made everybody laugh. He loved the Oklahoman accent.
Mm.
He tried to use it the best he could, that Oklahoma accent, and the family loved him. And so it was important for me to have that perspective. It was important that, and I think that I just wanted to be respectful of all the characters. And
Hmm.
like you mentioned with Lonnie coming back later. And I think one question that the readers got to answer for themselves is, does Lonnie and Ever get back together?
Right.
Are they
Right.
back together? By the read those last few paragraphs real close,
Hmm.
and it's kind of, I put it in there in a way that allows the reader to decide
Yeah.
if they do get back together, what does that mean?
Right.
So yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, and there's like Jimena and Ever lost their baby, which was incredibly gripping and sad and just depressing and depression inducing for her. And again,
Mhm.
you feel for them, you feel for her.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
We have Leander, who's kind of like a surrogate, not kind of, I mean, his surrogate son to Ever, and you see Ever doing work, being a healer in his own way. And Leander, you might call him a juvenile delinquent or something like that in old times. And it's like there's this double meaning where he says, "How did I get here?" When he's
Mhm.
literally like in this impossible situation,
Yeah.
escaping the cops. And you see his growth too. You see his progression, and he he's honest. See, there's a time where he wants to stab Ever with a pencil,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
He imagines it, right? I'm
Yeah.
going to stab him in the neck. The car's
Mm-hmm.
going to crash, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to jump out and I'm going to run. Like he sees it all happen, and so yeah, I mean, he comes from parents that are really aggressive, and so like he's like, I've seen my father do this before, so
Mm.
I know I can do it.
Right.
So yeah, it's just a really powerful kind of exchange between him and Ever.
Powerful the way you do it. I mean, you just see, you hear his desperation. You know he's just a hopeless person,
Mm.
right? I mean, you know better than I do. Working in the field that you do, like Father Greg Boyle out there with Homeboy Industries.
Hmm.
He always says, not no people with hope, no youth with hope join gangs.
Hmm.
It's just they don't have hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and with Leander, you see the hope, but you see hope come. You see hope come with Ever.
Yeah, and then that's one of the, an important moment inside of that particular chapter is
Mhm.
whenever Leander, he draws, right? Like
Sure.
that's the medicine. Um,
Yes.
and then so he's drawing this image of this park in Lawton. It's just this park with this
Mm.
big canal. But so whenever he's drawing from memory. Like the last time I see my dad, he was with these group of native dudes and he had this big stick and he like busted someone over the head.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, so that's what that was in his memory. But he goes, but what's in the picture that I drew that wasn't in my memory is this water in the canal.
Hmm.
Right. So that water becomes representation because the last line in that particular chapter references the water because, like hope rises with like water.
Yes.
But then you look back too, you juxtapose them to Lonnie. Her last name is No Water. Right.
Hmm.
So Lonnie, No Water, and Lonnie, nobody gave her any expectations.
Yes.
So in this moment where where Ever and Leander exchange with each other, Ever comes in and gives them expectations,
Hmm.
and so he draws in the water. So
Right.
there's, so then that's the difference between those two whenever you juxtapose them.
Oh yeah. Dang, I had some notes about, there was a great quote, like you said, something about the idea of expectations. I'm not going to find it, but yeah, just that the hope comes from him, giving him some responsibility, giving him a pencil, giving him some paper. Here's something to draw. Here's a place to draw. The last couple of chapters, there's about the quilt and the
Mhm.
quilt and this hunt for the four quilts that have the names. And there's so much there about connecting family. There's so much there about like personalization for each of the kids and the grandkids and great grandkids.
Yeah, that
And
familial love.
oh my gosh. And the last chapter, well, so in that is where the blanket dance is mentioned in the chapter about the
Mhm.
quilts, right?
Yeah.
Is am I correct in saying that calling for a blanket dance is like a benefit? It's like a mutual aid society.
Yeah, that particular act is like that. It's very much, it's like you're at church and you're one of your church family, they need help, right? And the pastor gets up there and says, "All right, congregation, can we help this family? And we're going to pass around the plate." And so we pass around the plate and you give what you can for that particular family. That's
Mm-hmm.
what the blanket dance is, exactly that.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's beautiful. It's forever, within his kids, and they need a place to live and all of that. When that last chapter brings in literally the housing where there's 50 slots, there's 50 Cherokee
Mhm.
homes. And am I right? Like basically like the first
Yep.
50 to like fill out the paperwork, get it?
Get it. Yep. So
Dang.
that was lived. I did that. So that whole the night before, stayed up all night. A rainstorm came in.
Mm-hmm.
Was super tired by that morning, and then when I woke up, there was like 25 of us all stayed overnight. And then when I woke up, there was like 100 people in line.
Uh-huh.
And then so it's not like a first come first serve, right? You get to stand closer in line,
Sure.
but once you get into that room, it is a madhouse, and you're just like filling out paperwork as fast as you can. Um, and that's a real situation that really happened. And I thought that captured perfectly
Oh,
this kind of sense of like, I got to take care of my kids. I need to, get this done. And then also it juxtaposes well with Turtle Gimasato, his mother. At the
uh-huh.
beginning, she's in that same situation. My husband's been injured. How do I save my family? How do I, keep us together? So it's the same kind of mentality, like a reflection between the mother and the son.
Right. So that last chapter is, meeting Lonnie or seeing Lonnie again,
Mhm.
where she says a really deep quote. He's not sure if she's using or how much of it just the effects of being, on drugs for so many years, but she says very simply, "I'm learning to love ever."
Mhm.
And there's this beautiful idea of like, can we have more than one mom? Is what the kids ask.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yes,
that's
you
what that's
can.
a
Right.
yeah, that's a traditional indigenous practice, is that we have multiple mothers who parent each other's kids in a very direct way, not like a I'm
Yeah.
just going to be around, but like I'm going to tell you what to do because you need to do the right thing. So, but it's like, and he gets an opportunity to teach his children that, like, okay, yeah, that's an indigenous
Uh-huh.
concept. We have multiple mothers, and that's the way Cherokees have been for generations.
Oh man. In the same way as like you talked about Tommy Orange, like his I don't know if it's called a preface or a foreword or whatever, probably a preface to his book. In the same way as that could be its own just piece of art, just incredible work of art. Just the preface itself is just mind blowing.
Hmm.
Your last chapter is so incredible. You talked about the community, everyone's getting together, it's raining, they're sharing
Hmm.
food, they're calling so and so comes over and brings over
Yep.
this, just communal. It's
Hmm.
just a beautiful, beautiful chapter. And I'm not going to ruin it by, especially saying that the very end. I'm not going to
Yeah.
ruin it by saying if ever gets to the front of the line or at least gets to within the 50.
Yeah.
But just a beautiful ending, and just that chapter itself could be its own book or short story.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. No, yeah, I thought that was yeah, a very yeah, very much wanted to end on that kind of a note where we get to see where ever gets to implement the teachings that he's been,
Hmm.
like, did it work? Is he going to step up for family? Is he
Right.
going to step up for community? Is he going to be a healing force as opposed to a destructive one?
Hmm. I wonder, maybe just ending up with kind of like, the title
Hmm.
and just ideas of like community and home. Like, are you calling for a blanket dance for the world? Are you the one calling for a blanket dance? What is it, I guess, saying about community?
I think that I think there is a certain dynamic to the novel, especially this larger theme with home and land that I guess in that sentimental way. And there's a lot of sentimental elements in this novel. It is definitely an emotional experience for sure.
Hmm.
In that unifying all of us together. So especially when we look at Baby Turtle or
Hmm.
Tortuga Bebe,
Yeah.
and her whole energy is that her whole existence is about unifying and healing old trauma, old wounds that we don't want to let go.
Mm.
We need to let them go, and we need to come together. But for sure, yeah, definitely, I am calling for a blanket dance. So
you pulled off. It's so difficult to do. I know in my amateur writing, it's so difficult to have a realistic story that is also positive or hopeful. Again, without being Mickey Mouse and woo and like a
yeah,
kid's fairy tale. You pulled it off. I mean, there are obviously very many negative experiences that happen throughout the book, but it is a positivity that really just leaves you beaming. And that's a hard book. It's an impossible book to just leave alone. I'm not going to just go about my daily life tomorrow and be like, all right. Like like the great books do, it changes you even just a little bit. So again,
oh, thank you.
congrats so much. And thanks for talking to me about it.
Yeah, no, thank you, Pete. Yeah, thank you for all that. Was really in depth what you just did. I appreciate that tremendously. That yeah. So I mean, I'm super excited that I got to do this with you, and we got to hang out. We get to talk like this. This was pretty amazing.
I appreciate you. I'd love to know what's coming up in the future for you.
So I got second book polishing on my end is polishing.
Yeah.
Once it gets to the editor, it's probably going to be a lot more to do. But yeah, second book is pretty close. And then also I have a third book in a first draft, and I actually thought it was pretty minimal. I opened it back up just I think yesterday, and it's a little meatier than I thought it was. So
Okay.
I might be further along than I thought I was on the third book. But yeah, definitely still working on other novels, similar themes where we're looking at Kiowa, Cherokee community, Tahlequah, Lawton intersections, and then we also have these nods or even trips into Mexico where we're kind of playing back and forth with that border, especially within the context of family is what I'm really, so
Wow.
yeah.
Do you think you'll ever go nonfiction?
I don't know. I've always just been a fiction writer.
Yeah.
Like I like to embellish and entertain. So a lot of what I write is kind of based on real life situations, like the situation where baby turtle had passed away, like that really happened to me. I had really lost a daughter in those exact circumstances. But there's a lot in that particular chapter that's just completely made up. The emotional part of it is real, but there's all the stuff surrounding it is radically different, and it's all fiction for sure. But I like doing that. I like taking like something that happened to a friend and just like, okay, then I'm gonna go down this rabbit hole and this rabbit hole, and I create this really complex world.
Yeah.
So I enjoy doing that.
You're definitely a world builder. So this book would look awesome on the screen. Like, so obviously you play yourself in that small cameo role with the books. Who plays Ever?
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's a good question. Um Wes Studi
Oh,
he has a son
not
named
him,
Colin.
but okay, I was gonna say, go ahead.
Colin Studi. I think he would be amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing ever. Yeah.
How old is Colin approximately? Is he like
He's in, I don't know, I want to say he's probably late 20s, early 30s.
okay, so he plays okay, yeah.
So he might be the
The older.
right at the end there.
All right.
So
Well,
yeah.
well, shout out any, social media, like, any particular bookstores you love us to buy the book. I know it's available everywhere, but any, like I said, social media and contact info.
Okay, yeah. No, I'm on Twitter, Instagram. My Instagram is getting bigger.
Yeah.
It's always been like my hierarchy, like Twitter, Facebook, and then Instagram.
Okay.
But I've been noticing I've gotten a lot of interactions on Instagram, so I've been growing it.
Good.
So Instagram for sure. And then also as far as like local bookstores, Two Fonda Books here in Tahlequah, Oklahoma.
Okay.
I might go in there and I sign all of their copies. So if you want like an autographed a copy of the book, that would Two Fonda Books, Tahlequah, Oklahoma. They have a website, and you can order it, and it'll be signed when it gets to you.
Very cool. Again, I want to thank you so much and just wish you great luck. And maybe we can talk when the second or third book comes out.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do it. Yeah,
Appreciate
thank
you
you
so
Pete.
much.
Thank you, Pete.
What a pleasure it's
Yeah.
been today to speak to Oscar Hokeah. Continue good luck to him with his writing, and I look so forward to continuing to follow his career. You can now subscribe to this podcast on Apple, leave a 5-star review. You can also ask for it by name using Alexa and find it on Stitcher, Spotify, and on Amazon Music. Follow me on Instagram where I'm at Chills at Will Podcast, or on Twitter where I'm at Chills at Will PO1. This is a passion project of mine, a DIY operation, and I'd love for your help in promoting what I'm convinced is a unique and spirited look at an often ignored art form. The intro song for the Chills at Will podcast is Wind Down Instrumental, and the other song played on the episode is Hoops Instrumental by Matt Whitehour, both songs used through archesaudio.com. Please tune in for episode 141 with Ingrid Rojas Contreras, whose first novel, Fruit of the Drunken Tree, was the silver medal winner in first fiction from the California Book Awards and a New York Times Editor's Choice. Her essays and short stories have appeared in the New York Times Magazine, BuzzFeed, Nylon, and Guernica, among others. Her latest, The Man Who Can Move Clouds, has been universally beloved and covered on NPR and the New York Times. That episode will air on September 6th. For now, thanks again for listening. I hope that these quarantine days bring you texts by writers with mad skills, like Oscar Hokeah, whose work, like Waiting for a Blanket Dance, gives you chills at will.